morning, everyone, and thank you for tuning into Real Talk. Today is a special day because we're taking time to recognize mental health awareness. Although some of you are aware, I must reiterate the fact that mental health is just as important to be cautious about as physical health. Mental disorders and other abnormalities occur in more individuals than one would think. Statistically, 25% of American adults, those ages 18 and older, and about 13% of American children, those ages 8 to 15, are diagnosed with a mental disorder during any given year. Mental illness does not discriminate. It can affect people of any age, income, or educational level and cultural background. That being said, let's explore the topic of a culture-based disorder from outside of the United States and try to discover ways we can relate to it. To do that, we're going to need some help from an expert in the field. Please welcome our special guest, Raymond Prince, to talk to us about the disorder he developed.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Hello, Raymond. Thanks for taking the time on your busy schedule to meet with us at Real Talk.
Oh, thanks for having me. If you want, you can call me RH.
Okay, RH. Let's talk about the disorder that you founded. What is it called?
Well, I discovered Brain Fag Syndrome in Nigeria during the 1960s.
What led to this important discovery?
Well, I observed symptoms and repetitive gestures that motivated me to continue to further to look into this epidemic based around male college students in Nigeria during the 1960s.
How did you come up with that name?
I actually didn't come up with it on my own. The students that were experiencing the syndrome of brain fatigue referred to it as brain fag, and the name just stuck.
That sounds very interesting. What prevalent symptoms stood out to you during this time?
Well, at first I saw the students were experiencing major depressive disorder because many of them couldn't concentrate on a matter on hand and showed diminished interest in most activities. But as the somatic complaints and the demographic distribution soon changed, my mind made me realize that these symptoms must represent something else.
Could you explain this in a little bit more detail?
Sure. My original symptoms were broken down into two different types of impairments: intellectual impairments and sensory impairments that were mostly visually related, and some somatic complaints such as burning sensation in the head and the neck regions.
What were some common features that you saw in the syndrome?
Well, the main feature of the syndrome were prolonged sensation in the head and body, unpleasant, clinical symptom pain, burning, heat in the head, and feeling of vacancy. The visual disturbances consist of diminishing interest, pain in the eyes, and tearing. Lastly, cognitive impairments such as inability to grasp or writing or spoken words, inability to concentrate, poor retention. There was a variety of other symptoms such as weaknesses, dizziness, writer's cramp, and migraine pain as well.
So here's a video for our viewers that they have a visual representation of what RH believed to be the observable symptoms.
Discrimination, stereotyping. Where are they in the functional order? Beginning, middle, end. In the beginning. Okay.
Discrimination.
What comes before discrimination? Prejudice. Yes.
Now, that was a perfect example of what brain fag looks like. It reminds me of the man I observed in my synopsis, Mr. A.
Actually, as a special treat for our guests, we would like to bring out Mr. A so he can talk to us directly about the symptoms that he was experiencing.
Well, it's always the best idea to get a self-report analyzation coming from the person experiencing the symptoms. I'm excited to see how he is doing.
Awesome. Everyone, please welcome Mr. A to our show, and keep in mind he is in a fragile state while trying to keep up with his schooling.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me.
Well, it's great. How are you doing?
I've been okay. I've been trying to stay on top of things before I graduate.
Mr. A, I understand that you've been diagnosed with Brain Fag Syndrome. Can you explain to the viewers what your original symptoms were like?
So at first I thought I was just really overwhelmed with school. However, I realized that my symptoms were more extreme than any of the other symptoms in my classes. I was feeling burning sensations in my head and pains in my eyes that resulted in me crying all the time. I would start to feel very weak and dizzy when I would attempt to study or do any sort of comprehension work. I started to realize that my symptoms were exacerbated by reading or listening to lectures. I also became more and more forgetful, and my lack of concentration really began to impede on my ability to study.
I can't imagine what you went through during this time. RH, can you explain some of these symptoms?
Oh, sure. The symptom onset is gradual, and the somatic symptoms in the head typically occurs prior to the feeling of intellectual impairments. This makes sense why Mr. A experienced burning sensation in the head while reading.
Wow, so it sounds like these symptoms can occur with intellectual activity of any kind, at any given time. That's scary. How did you manage yourself?
My symptoms were continuously present, so I started to isolate myself from any intellectual activity because I couldn't deal with my excruciating symptoms any longer. I was so unhappy and I couldn't keep living like that, so I was grateful for RH to come into my life and make symptoms that I had seem valid and significant.
Well, the day I met Mr. A, he stood out to me because of the sad, anxiety-ridden look on his face. He was continuously scratching his scalp, rubbing the vertex of his skull, especially when the professor would discuss a question. I could physically see Mr. A attempting to concentrate on the matters at hand in order to answer this question, and I was easily observable that he knew the answer, he just couldn't articulate it. That's when I knew he was the perfect candidate for me to utilize my new scale of measurement.
What scale are you talking about?
Well, the Brain Fag Syndrome scale, also known as BFSS, is a screening scale I developed. It screens for and diagnoses brain fag syndrome using 3 responses options of 0, 1, 2, corresponding to never, sometimes, and often. The scores ranges from 1 to 14, and higher scores represent a manifestation of the syndromes. When the respondent has a score of 6 or higher, the respondent is considered to be manifesting brain fag. For a diagnosis to be reached, the score of 6 and above must have item 4 and item 5 represented with either a 1 or 2. The scale has been found to have face validity. Some examples of items are: I suffer unpleasant sensation in my body related to study, and I experience brain burning, crawling heat or cold, or other unpleasant sensations in my head while studying. Items like this help indicate to what degree an individual experiencing syndromes of brain fag.
Did you have any help in developing the scale?
Although I originally formulated the scale, Mr. Moracchino modified it in years later in order for it to be used in a more efficient manner. I appreciate his work because it has allowed the disease I discovered to become stronger and more developed.
The development of psychology as a whole arises from multiple perspectives debating with each other.
Exactly. This is why the science of psychology keeps advancing at such a fast pace.
We want our viewers to gain a true, deeper understanding of this culture-bound syndrome. I think that bringing another expert on the topic would be beneficial.
That's certainly the case. Having multiple perspectives on a topic allows for the contents to be challenged. With that, the topic can become stronger and more well-developed. I think this is a great idea.
Awesome. With that being said, let's welcome Dr. Chichi Ogwaya to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show. I am excited to give a different perspective on brain fag syndrome and cultural-based disorders as a whole.
We're excited to have you. To start off, can you tell viewers a few things about yourself?
So my name is Chichi Abwaye. I'm a psychiatrist from London, England, with descent from Nigeria. I am currently a consultant psychiatrist at a variety of hospitals, and I have studied and improved upon the cultural-based syndrome, brain fag syndrome.
Seeing as you have a lot of experience with multiple cultural-based disorders, what's your opinion on them? From what I understand, they can seem to be pretty controversial.
The thing with culture-bound syndromes is that they can be a nuisance, an outlier if you will, but outliers can be very informative. Recently, cultural neuroscientists began to study our brain process information differently depending on what culture you are from and exposed to as a child. Cultural variations in mental health problems highlights the limitations of Western psychiatry, but can inspire us to explore how culture can impact both brain functioning and malfunctioning.
Since you have a lot of practice regarding culture-bound syndromes, can you give us a European perspective on brain fag syndrome?
Brain Fag Syndrome is not a brand new concept. During the British colonial days, medical practitioners from Africa were already reporting colored students having difficulties concentrating on academic materials. At this point in time, however, symptoms of Brain Fag Syndrome, such as somatic disorders and a lack of academic interest, were thought to be contributed to by the practice of underfeeding. Nevertheless, it affirms that Brain Fag Syndrome is a cultural-bound mental disease.
Culture-bound mental disorders are prevalent in our world today. It is important to be aware of these because each demographic obtains different types of mental disorders that affect each individual differently. With that being said, I hope our viewers are able to relate to Brain Fag Syndrome within their own lives while taking into consideration that the brain processes information differently depending on what culture you're exposed to as a child. Thank you for our guests for being here today. Now for a special segment of our show, we have a couple of questions for the audience. Each will be up for 30 seconds, and the first participant to get the answer correct will receive a special mystery prize from our sponsor, RH Prints. For everyone else who didn't answer a question, wait till the end of the show for your complimentary prize. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Real Talk. Thank you again to all of our guests and our lovely audience. We will see you next time.